Hey guys, welcome back. So just came off of the live with Nina over at Ninja's Orchids about Phalaenopsis Rescue, and this is one of the ones that we talked about. So if you want to check that out, go on, head over to her channel. She'll be posting it in a little bit. I'm sure it's going to take a while, but I realized that she has been in this pot since August of 21. I'm pretty sure I could go another year with this moss. It is the New Zealand Sphagnum Moss, but I kind of want to prove a point. So in that video, we talked about pot size. So I'm going to put her in this pot. So she's going to go from this pot to this pot. This is about 2 sizes up. I'm going to put her back in moss. This time, though, I am going to add some perlite. And another thing we were talking about was keeping the moss fluffy but snug, because this moss is fluffy, but it's snug. So what I mean by snuffy, I'm not going to say we, because I'm not sure if Nina means the same thing. Let me move this out of the way so I can show you real quick. But this moss, it's a new block. So it's very, very compacted together. It is not nice and fluffy and able to be broken apart. So the moss that is in here, what I did is I took it and made sure I didn't have big knots like this, and just made sure that it was nice, fluffy, and maintained some space basically, as opposed to being compacted super tight when we first get it and we wet it. That's what I consider compact, when it's like this and you go to pull it and you see how it's not giving because it's so compacted. However, fluffy moss, you can pick it up and drop it. So now that's what I mean by fluffy. By snug, that means I'm going to put quite a bit of moss in there, but not so much where it's going to compact on itself, because the way that it compacts is if you water it from the top and push that water down, that can compact it. It doesn't mean it will, but it can. Whereas what I like to do with the orchids that I have in all moss is I like to set it into the water, and then I will fill it up to about a quarter, whatever that is, because most of this is pot. But I like to fill it up to about right here. I leave it in there for about 3 to 5 minutes until I can see it start wicking up pretty good. I take it out. I put it in another empty pot and let it just sit there for a while, probably about 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, if all of the moss is evenly dampened, then I know that she has enough water in here. Another thing you can do is you can fill the bottom. If you have the holes in the pot, you can kind of fill your moss up under the bottom and see if it's damp or if it's close to dryness. So this one was watered a couple of days ago, so she is still damp. Let me move that out. But what we're going to do is we're going to take her out of the pot, and then we're going to also talk about all these beautiful aerial roots, because we also discussed using aerial roots as a backup. Now she's got plenty of roots in that we can see. She doesn't really need backup. Lovely, she hasn't grown. I have a new root growing right there, I just saw. So pull her out. And let's see what we have in here. And there is a little bit of algae buildup just at the edge. She did have moss on top of her, but you can see there's quite a bit of moss in here. So once I'm done, I'm going to show you how much moss was in this pot. I did get her potted in moss. I do see one root that we'll probably have to cut off. And of course, I didn't bring my clippers, but fortunately, they're right there on the table beside me. The thing I love about moss is it's so easy to do a repot, because you just can pretty much gently remove it. It doesn't really damage the roots too much because it doesn't stick to it like bark will to damage that velamen. And of course, I'm going to have to figure out how to get the tag out, because this root has grown into the tag. And let's see. Actually, I can just cut the tag off, I think, and make a new tag. I think that's what we'll do. So you can see she's got quite the roots that are going down in the pot, okay? She does have a few here that are a little tired, but not as many as you would expect. And most of the roots that do have dying velamen on them are the ones that she went in with. And all I'm going to do is pull the velamen off, and that will help me determine where to cut. That's another little trick that I do with an orchid is I like to pull the velamen off, and then this way when it's time to cut the roots, you can really see what you're doing. Now this one, let's see. The velamen is poor on that part, but if we go further down, we have this nice long root here, but I will probably cut that off anyway, simply because it is dead at the top and it is attached to another root. There we go. So we'll probably cut that one off because she's got plenty in a repot to help her. So let me grab, where's that new root? I have a new root coming in. All these roots are getting caught on the pot. Hold on. Look at me rhyming. I'm just a poet already. But there's a new root growing there. So let me go get my cutters real quick. Oh my goodness, where do I put her? Let me just put her right there real quick. Because the scissors, well, the clippers are literally right here. So I'm just going to, all of those strings that I pulled the velamen off will help me know where to cut. And if you're a beginner, as far as this is your first time or you haven't repotted a lot of them and you're not very confident, if you just pull the velamen off, the string or the actual root be left behind, and this way you know where to cut and you're not going to cut into a good root. That one is completely dead. So that is what a completely dried root looks like. It looks almost like a little piece, like a little stick. Some of these do have some kinks in them, but I'm not too concerned with the kinks. Cut that one there. Well, that just kind of came off on its own. And then I was going to cut the tag, wasn't I, off of the root here. But I don't want to flip the orchid around the other way because that's where that new root is growing. And it is growing towards the media. So let's see if we can just snip that side of the tag and snip that side of the tag. So we got that part off. And gently pull this off. All right. So if you look where the tag was, you see it's indented, but it's not kinked. Whoop, maybe you can you see that? See it right there? The little kink, but it's not like this one where I broke that. Now, what I'm going to do is this aerial root right here, as you can see, has a growing tip. And let's pick on another one. This one has a growing tip. And then this one has the beginning of a growing tip. It's very, very minimal, but it is beginning to show. So what I'm going to try to do is these 3 aerial roots we're going to put into the pot. And we're going to see if they survive being put into moss after being in the air their entire lives. This one here has a kink on it, so I don't think I'm going to use that one actually. Nope. So that's another thing you want to kind of look for. I'm actually going to go ahead and cut this one because it does have that kink, just to keep further damage going. Let's see if we can find some other ones here. Okay, yeah, these 2 are actually a good candidate. You can't really see, oh, I guess if I got it closer to the camera, but this one here, the root tip is just beginning. I don't know if this is going to be big enough, guys. Honestly, I think I may end up having to get a bigger pot for her. But we're going to make her go in there. She's going to fit one way or the other. If I've got to cut this long, beautiful root, we will do that. Now, where is my spray bottle? It's right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet these aerial roots to try to make them a little more pliable when I'm putting them in the pot. And I'm just going to use this bowl here. So that's, you kind of want to wet them a little bit. Try to stay away from the crown, of course, because we don't want any to go into there. And it is early enough in the day. If I set her underneath the fan, if I miss anything, it'll go dry. But you can see that they're greening up, which means they are absorbing moisture. And I generally do not spray my aerial roots. And let's get these 2 back here because we're going to get them in as well. Those are the 2 that we saw with the really good active roots that we could actually see growing. Now, looseberry in and of herself is an aerial root producer. I have another one, again, if you go check out that video, you'll see it, that has roots in the pot and all kinds of aerial roots. So, let me also go get my mycorrhizal fungi. Y'all can tell this was impromptu because I am so not prepared. But while I'm getting this, everyone leave in the comments if you watched the live, if you've been to the live, if you have any questions as far as what we were talking about. And how is your day? We are having a very gloomy day today here in Denver, Colorado. It's gonna rain all next week. It has rained for the last 3 weeks, every freaking day. And as much as I enjoy the fact that it is saving me money on my water bill because I'm not having to water my grass and the potted plants outside, it is getting a little old, just a little. So what I'm gonna do first, and this one does have a air cone in it as well, and you can get these from the Orchid Supply Store. He just recently got these pots in. And the cool thing about these larger ones is they do have the holes if you wanted to hang them, just hang the pot itself. That is amazing. And if you do decide to go over to orchidsupply.store.com and peruse the pots, the media, they've got orchids. Use coupon code TRISH at checkout and get 12% off. He does ship internationally. I am going to check to see if that means complete internationally or if that means Canada. So I will, if I find out before I post the video, I will pin it at the top. If not, I will pin it once I find out. And he being Ken. All right, so let's see. Normally, oh, I found another root I forgot. Nice and dead. Has that stick-like figure. I'm gonna lay that right there so I don't break that new root coming in. There we go. And then are we, yep, we're gonna cut this one too because I'm gonna show you. Just pull it, I wonder if that's, no, it's not. But the top of the root, that velamen was dying off. Although it's got a beautiful bottom root, she's got plenty that I can go ahead and cut. Now, if she were really low on the root system and struggling, I would have just taken the velamen off and left the root on. So that's another way to kind of decide if you want to keep your roots or not. And if you are trying to rescue your phal, I would definitely have left that root on and just taken the velamen off. But you can see she's got 2 spikes here dried off. And then if we turn her around, that was 2 more spikes. So she likes to show off and bloom a lot as well. Let's see if we can get all of these kind of ladies in here. I don't really like the fact that this pot has holes in it, but the pot that I have that does not have holes, let's see, these guys were going in, it is way too big. It's a 10-inch, so I'm not that crazy. I'm crazy, but not that crazy. So I'm just going to twist her around to try to get these roots to fit, and one of these roots is already trying to come out that hole. Let me get her in there. And as you can see, we've got those aerial roots in. Even though this one has the kink, I'm still gonna go ahead and use her. And then let's guide this one in and tuck it under so it stays. There we are. And then we've got one more. And like I said, it does have the root tip. So that's an important key when you're using your aerial roots as a plan B. Let's just say she was very, very low on the root system. These aerial roots would be her saving grace. And I do have my window open, so if you hear those cars going by, I'll apologize about it one time. I'm trying to get her back into the center. There we go. And by spraying those aerial roots, making them a little bit more pliable, it's kind of helping me move them around because they're actually the ones that are trying to make her lean. Now what I'm going to do, turn this so you can kind of see. This is the front of the plant. And since she's not a leaner, she tends to grow straight up. I'm just going to keep her kind of centralized in the pot. And then I take my moss and I drop it in and I press it down just enough to get it down into the pot. I'm not making it super compact, but I am pressing it down. Some people prefer to work with dry moss. I prefer to work with wet moss in most situations. There are some occasions where I will use the dry moss, but in general, I like using the wet moss because then I know how much I've snugged it up, so to speak. Some people would say it was compacting it, but I'm making it snug. So it's still fluffy, still airy, but I'm getting it so that I'm also closing up most of the air holes that may be in there. And she is used to being nice and snug in her pot. Another thing that you can do if you're trying to rescue your phal, especially if it is very low on the root system, is by placing it in a mask, because what that mask will do, it will help keep, especially if you're using a pot with air holes, it will keep the media from drying out sooner because it'll keep that moisture in. It won't allow a lot of airflow. It will allow some airflow, but not a lot. And I like to pot my phals where the bottom leaves are sitting on top of the pot. And then back here, I need to be very careful because, let me show you, let me move this moss out of the way. We have a lot of roots back there, and we have those aerial roots, so I want to make sure I am not crushing them. Now, in the past, I have used the bamboo skewer to do this. I will do it if it is bark, to kind of wiggle the bark, but I have discovered that generally I'm poking the root. So right here, I had a big gap, so I just took that moss and just pushed it down. So I am pushing down on the moss, but I'm not making it tight. I'm just pushing it down enough to fill in some of the gaps, which, you know, with Phalaenopsis, they don't mind a lot of air gaps, but if I can get the moss to fill in most of the gaps, that will help when I'm watering so that it doesn't have dry spots as well. All the moss will talk to each other, so to speak. So leave in the comments your preferred method of rescuing phals. And I'm saying rescuing phals because we just got off of the subject of rescuing phals, so it's kind of on my mind. I so enjoy talking about it. I love the phals, and I just think that they are one of the easiest orchids to grow, whether they're the hybrid or if they are the polychilous. I know some people do struggle, but I think once you figure out what works in your environment, you can be successful. I did not think of this through because normally I just go around in a circle, but running my mouth, I wasn't paying attention. So now I've got this big gap right here I need to fill in, again, with lots of roots, and trying to keep her in the center because she definitely wants to go all off on her own over there. So that's where this is going to come in. And as you can see, I hope, I'll tip it up just a little bit so you can kind of see what I'm doing. But I am pressing, I'm just not pressing hard. So I am just kind of guiding it, so to speak, down in there. Because if you look at it, it's still nice and fluffy, okay? You see that? But it did fill in that gap. Put some more, so that it is in between les roots as well. Now, if I were wanting to transition her into bark, this repotting, she would have been in a layered setup. Let me pull that root out of there because I see where it is not gonna do any good. Let's see if I can do it without, I've already broken it. Let's just drag it out of there, yeah. So it is, I'll show you guys here in just a second. Do you see? It was already drying out on the tip, so may as well go ahead and get rid of it. And I lost my train of thought. Oh, if I were trying to transition her into a bark mix, now would be a good time to do the moss and bark layering and using those new roots, those aerial roots, to basically be my transition roots, because I also have a new root coming. Those aerial roots have active root tips, so they would just start growing in that new environment. And then the next time, again, I would wait and use aerial roots and just put her in a complete bark setup. That is kind of what's worked for me. Sometimes we have to take steps to get them to where we want them to work in our environment. You have to kind of work with them first. It's not always going to fail, but most of the time, if you just take it from a very humid environment, i.e. moss, and then throw it into bark, especially new bark that likes to dry out rather quickly, you're gonna struggle a lot longer than if you work with what you have, add something that is a little more moisture retentive until you get those new roots that get more acclimated, and then gradually move her into what you want. And of course, she is now all up in the front, but that's okay. We still got time to fix it. I am putting a lot of moss in here. I mean, I know it looks like I'm putting a lot of moss, and I am, because she came out of a lot of moss. So she's used to being snug as a bug in a rug, or in this case, snug as a bug in moss. And when I work with moss, I also am very diligent to make sure that I don't leave any moss pieces in the leaf joint, on the leaves, anything like that, because I don't want to risk that crown rot. And that can happen. So with this one, I am going to leave it like this, and then I'm going to just top her off, because I got the moss a little bit lower than I did last time. I'm trying to avoid the moss getting that algae just on the edge. I don't know if I've got that right, but let me put her in her pot and see. I think I probably guessed that right, because the edge of the mass goes to right here. So the rest of this is just going to be some bark. And it's just some bark I already have mixed up. It's not a special reason why I'm using this particular one. So I didn't put the mycorrhizal fungi at the bottom, but it's okay. I can just sprinkle a little bit on the top here. And because this moss is already dampened, it will go ahead and activate. And the roots were just watered, so I don't have to do anything with the pot itself. But before I add the moss, I'll put a few slow release fertilizer beads in here. I put them in here even though I do use the MSU fertilizer, because with moss, I don't use the MSU every time. I only use the MSU once a month with my moss orchids. Well, orchids that are in moss, simply because it does retain moisture longer. So when I use just plain water, sometimes the residual feed may build up. But with a couple of beads of slow release fertilizer, she's at least getting something, because she's very, very vigorous, as you can tell. So this is just some mix I already had. It's just orchiata bark, fir bark, and some perlite. So that is just going to go around the base. Get it up under that leaf there. And it'll just fall into all the creases and crevices that I may have missed, which is fine. I'm not too concerned that the top of the orchid is bark and the bottom is moss, because the roots will find their way in. So don't stress about that part, but it does help to keep from that nasty algae building up on top. And it's unsightly unless you live in certain conditions, and then specific types of algae can be detrimental, not just to your plants, but to you. So do research what type of algae grows in your area. I know here the algae that grows on the moss is not detrimental to me. So even if I decided not to put the bark layer on top and the moss, that nasty green, grew, it wouldn't be detrimental for me to take it off, because the fumes and everything from it, spores, that kind of thing, would not affect anyone in the house. So as you can see, from the rim, or the bottom of the rim to the top, is all bark. And the theory behind that is, with that being there, the light doesn't cause algae, but we shall see. Again, I have her in a mask, so she was in a mask in her previous pot, which does help hold moisture in this pot much longer, so I don't have to water her as often. And I'll have to make a new tag, or do I? No, I can just use this one, because yeah, I cut the bottom, but you know what? I can still fit it in here. And she's not quite in the center like I wanted her, but you know what? That's all right. She'll do her, and I'll be happy. So let's keep an eye on the progress of this one, see what happens to the aerial roots. And just as a reminder, we'll know that these right here, this little grouping right here, and I'll put like a black magic marker or something so we can really identify them as they mature. I'll make an X there somewhere so that we know that these were the aerial roots. We'll continue watching them to see what they do. The other ones are not out where we can see them very well, but I think these will be a good monitor there. Remember to go watch the live over at Nina's. We had a real fun time over there, lots of good discussions. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Appreciate that. And just to let you guys know, for those of you who weren't there will be a part 2. We'll be doing it live from our channel here at Trisha's Orchid Life, and we will be having Miss Nina from Ninja Orchids as our guest. So if you have any questions for that one as far as Phalaenopsis rescue, leave it in the comments below. Send me an email. It is in my description. Reach out to Nina if you want to ask her a question, and we will get those answers then. I hope everyone is having a beautiful day, and I'll see you on the next one.